We welcome you to the Priscilla R. Tyson Cultural Arts Center for our conversations and coffee today on this 20th day of the month of November, 2025. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. We're delighted to have with us Robert Bob Argo, the third generation owner of Argo and Lehne Jewelers, a 101-year-old full-service jeweler in Upper Arlington. Bob, stand up here. We'll give you... Yeah. We're so grateful to have you with us. As an art enthusiast, you saw a profound connection between jewelry displayed so beautifully at your store, but you saw the connection with art. How much of a gift to our city. Thus, in 2011, when local sculptor Alfred Tibor approached you about displaying his work in your store, you jumped at the opportunity. And when I visited your store to have you care for my precious diamond ring that I inherited from my grandmother, I was deeply moved when I saw Alfred Tibor's art. I had taken college and university students on a mission to Washington, D.C., and we visited the Holocaust Museum. I knew Alfred's family had been impacted by that horrendous event of the Holocaust because he'd shared with me and us here at the Cultural Arts Center. I had invited him as a guest artist for Conversations and Coffee because I had known his profound contribution to the world, including the world of art. Since 2011, our guest artist, Bob, at his Argo and Lehne jewelry store, has sold 40 of Alfred's uniquely personal works. Alfred became the first 3D artist at Argo Lehne. This mission of Bob's grew to become Art at Argo's, a series of quarterly exhibitions to highlight and support local artists. Argo and Lehne facilitated the donation of Alfred's larger works to the city of Upper Arlington. 3 on display outside the Miller Park Library in Northam Park, just east of the Tremont Library. On YouTube, there are videos of Alfred's 14 large works around Columbus. 20 of his remaining smaller works are on view at Argo and Lehne as well on its website. Bob, in addition to holding up this amazing story and contribution of Alfred Tibor, you have given much to our city, from contributing to the Habitat for Humanity, Construction Board, the Columbus Rotary Club, the Hard Food Pantry Board, and been a faith mission volunteer serving the homeless and the working poor. You are the father of son Josh, a material science engineer in San Jose, California, and father of daughter Eva, a jeweler, engraver, photographer, coder at Argo Lehne. We're delighted to have you with us, celebrating your call to the arts and the legacy and art of Alfred Tibor. Welcome to you. Take it away.
I want to thank Ellen for inviting me here today and giving me this opportunity to talk about Alfred. You probably know he has a couple sculptures very near here. The title of this is Celebration of Life, and that was the title of this particular sculpture, which is on the west side of the Broad Street Bridge, and oddly, not part of the city of Columbus. It's a small little section of that is Franklin County. So the Franklin County Commissioners are responsible for its upkeep. And I found that out because one of them came in a number of years ago and wanted to know how to maintain it. This is the mayor's wife of Franklinton back around 1900. And this is a black child she adopted, which caused a little stir back then, but it kind of just shows how progressive Columbus has been throughout his history. And then he has another one which I don't know if it'll pop up. I think I'm going to let him hold forth at the beginning. This will be one of his 5-minute YouTube videos just explaining some of the pieces around town. But there's a sculpture called Freedom over there that when the weather's nice, people that are becoming American citizens are sworn in front of it, and has a little inscription about the American dream in front of it. It's down there on the Scioto Mile on the east side, and there's I think I think it might be the county courthouse or the federal courthouse or something there. So all right, so let me have Alfred hold forth for a few minutes, and then we'll continue.
And Dottie, who is your wonderful assistant there with all these images, going to share with us her filming here.
You'll see this sculpture will be towards the beginning. Okay, kind of on the.
My name is Alfred Tibor, and I was born in 1920, February the 10th, and I live here in Columbus, Ohio, and I became a sculptor. When we are going to approach every work of mine, all of them are dealing with humanity. All of my pieces are dealing with humanity, and that's the beauty of my work. Because of my background, my life background, I am a Holocaust survivor, and actually that's why my life, I am fortunate, because my dream came true when I became a sculptor here. Accidentally, I am teaching the people for the future generation. Whenever pieces they're going to see, they're going to learn from the past what the future is bringing. The most important feeling in the human race to embrace each other. And that's the importance of my work. And that's why if you are asking any questions from any piece, it is all of them the same importance, because it is not talking about anything else, just to being a human being. There is no differences between one and the other piece. All of them are dealing with humanity, and it is all important to me. When I was a little boy, a 6-year-old little boy, and I realized I have some artistic talent, because I was starting to make with the fresh dough, to making little figures. And I put it in the window and it's dried. And after I realized I have a touch in my hand, only I just tell you that time I felt I am going to be an artist. I am going to be a sculptor. Where I got the idea, it was in a little village where I grown up in Hungary, and I went by the church and I saw a statue there. Every time when I was going to the market and I asked my dear mother, can I go to see my statue? So that was the piece which is guided me. I am going to make statues like that. Now the story is continuing. I am skipping all of my life, and I arrived to Columbus, Ohio when I was 56 years old. And in the synagogue in 1973, there was one person was walking up to the pulpit and asking money for a Holocaust memorial. And I was sitting in the 10th row with my son, and I said to him, Tom, I am going to make the memorial. And he said, Daddy, are you crazy? You never did, you are an artist, only you never did any three-dimensional piece. I said, you don't know me yet. And that piece is showing not just the 6 million, it is showing the 11 million victims of the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust is not Jewish. The Holocaust is against humanity. And this is the way I am a victim of the Holocaust only through my religion, through my humanity. I succeeded with my willpower. God gave me the talent, and I succeeded and did it and started to make sculpting pieces. Only the entire first sculpting piece was the Zachor, which means to remember, and it is standing in the Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio.
Beautiful. Nate?
So, any questions on anything Alfred touched on before I continue?
When did he say he came to America?
He came to America in the early 50s. So he had that, and when he says he's a Holocaust survivor, it's kind of ironic. He was drafted into the Hungarian army, and they wore the Hungarian army uniform, but they had a little yellow band on their sleeve, and then they used them kind of like a chain gang, and they dug latrines, and they put in pontoon bridges in cold rivers, and then they were kind of sent ahead if they thought there might be an ambush to see if anybody shot at them. And so then when so he was fighting, the Hungarians were allied with Germany and Italy, and when they lost to Russia, he was taken as a prisoner by the Russians. And I think the only thing worse than spending 6 years in a gulag in Siberia is being in a Nazi concentration camp. So he thought he had kind of bad misfortune being put in a gulag, which didn't exist. They were up in the permafrost building their gulag. That was their work, was building the gulag. And he managed to ingratiate himself with the guards, and he sometimes got light duty because he would sketch pictures of their children and their wives and things for them. And but anyway, he came back after 6 horrible years in the gulag, and he found out he had survived the Holocaust, because while he was in the gulag, 80-some members of his family had been gassed in the Holocaust. And he took his brother's name, Tibor. His name was Alfred Goldstein, which was a very Jewish name. And his brother's first name was Tibor. So his surviving brother and he took their brother's name as to honor him, and so their names didn't sound quite so Jewish. And so his brother was also an artist, and he had gotten his medical degree, but he hadn't been, I don't know quite how that works with back then with the residency and internship and stuff, but it's like he'd passed the law, but he hadn't passed the bar. But he was a doctor per se, but he was finding work in Italy for like a World's Fair, and he was safe, and he designed a pavilion for their World's Fair, and then he found out that there were a lot of Jewish people that had fallen ill, that were Jewish soldiers, and he came back to tend to them and make them well. And so he moved back into Nazi-occupied territory, and he cured some of them, but before it was all done, they decided it just wasn't worth the trouble to do this, so they took them all out. So he went from a safe place to a risky place to do his calling as a doctor, and so Alfred and his brother honored him by taking his name. Any other questions about what he's talked about so far? All right, we're going to go through these sculptures that we still have at the store, and I'll just say a little bit about each one. No, go ahead.
Do you know what brought him to Columbus?
Yes, so he, and I'll bring this up when we get to that sculpture, but he, after the war, Jewish artists, you're not allowed to be an artist in Soviet Russia or their SSRs if you're Jewish. So they took up other occupations like architect or stage designer, and he had a job as window designer for the department stores around Budapest. He had 17 department stores he was responsible for designing their windows. That's how Andy Warhol got started. He was designing Tiffany windows before he became an artist per se. And there's a PBS show called Selfridge, which is about an American that opens an early department store in London, and it's all about the window displays. And the window display with the pedestrian traffic in the urban environments was basically like a website today. So he was in charge of, he had a nice life. He was making good money as a window designer, and his children were young. They were tots, and but Hungary under the Russian influence was becoming more and more anti-Semitic, and they were they passed their legislature passed a resolution about the role of Jewish people in their society, and that was the last straw for Alfred. So he picked Christmas, and he and his wife escaped with their 2 children to Austria. And so there was a no man's land of 200 yards between, which was monitored by the Soviets if you're trying to escape Hungary. And so he figured at Christmas there would be fewer guards on duty, and the ones that were might have had a few drinks, and so they wouldn't shoot as straight. So they each took a child and carried it across. They made it to like a few feet of the Austrian border, and then his wife, Suzanne, dropped Ava, and Ava cried. And so the lights came on at the watchtowers, and people started shooting at him, but they made it across to Austria before anybody got hit. Anyway, they were stuck in Austria in a refugee camp for a while. And then Nixon, as part of his, I don't know if I'd call it grandstanding, but his political, he was vice president, and it was his big photo op to go to Austria and secure placement for the refugees in the refugee camp in Austria in the United States. But they had to have a sponsor, and Alfred had a sponsor in Miami, and a guy that had a furniture store called Modern Furniture. So Alfred became his head of merchandising and marketing. And after he'd worked there for a number of years, he decided he saw somebody in the New York Times was signing their ads, and a lot of them were hand done at the time because the photography reproduction in the newsprint wasn't all that great. So when we used to advertise jewelry back in the 50s, we had line drawings of the jewelry, because if you took a photo of it and put it in the newsprint. It was like just horrible. So he was the artist that did all the line drawings, and he thought it'd be nice if he started signing his ads. And so he did that, and then after a few months, somebody brought that to the attention of his boss, and he told him he had to stop doing that. And he said he wasn't going to. And he says, "What are you going to do about it? You going to fire me?" And he said, "No, you're too valuable. So, okay, just keep doing that." But because he was signing his ads, Jerome Schottenstein noticed him, and he says, it's kind of like Walt Disney. When Walt Disney designed Disney World, he said he knew who he wanted to design Disney World, and his staff said, "Who's that?" He says, "I don't know, but it's the admiral that won the war in the Pacific. That's who I want. So figure out who he is and make him do that." So they did. But so Alfred said, so Jerome Schottenstein said, "I don't know who this guy is, but I like his ads, so I want you to hire him." And they said, "Where is he?" He says, "Well, it looks like he's in Miami." And so anyway, Schottenstein hired him up here. And Alfred likes to say he made him such a good initial offer that he never gave him a raise. And so he was able to commute because Ava was still in high school and he wanted to finish her senior year. So he would work here on the weekdays and all expenses paid. He'd commute back to Miami for the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And all the big Schottenstein meetings were on Sunday because the Sabbath is on Saturday. And everyone had to be there, no exceptions, but Alfred was exempted from those. And so he and Schottenstein had developed a very close relationship. He wasn't popular with the other staff to begin with till he won him over because he was getting out of these mandatory meetings. But so that's how he came to Columbus. And when he wanted to retire, and he hadn't really started sculpting till he retired, or semi-retired. He wanted to sculpt from the time he was 6, but his first sculpture was the synagogue that he mentioned, and and then that was on a very limited basis. He did some Holocaust things, but when he retired, he wanted to go full-fledged into sculpting. And Schottenstein said, "You can't retire. I don't have anybody to replace you. You need to keep working." He says, "But, it's time for me to retire." And so Schottenstein gave him a space in one of his warehouses, and he funded whatever he needed for his tools and things so he could do the sculpting that he wanted to do, as long as he agreed to continue working for him, at least part-time, and to oversee the staff until he had somebody trained up to replace him. So Schottenstein got him started in the sculpting, and it's, again, I didn't meet him till he was in his mid-90s, but he either started when he was 76 or in 1976. He's not real sure which one. So anyway, yes.
What mediums does he sculpt?
So he sculpted he started out sculpting in alabaster and marble. The guy that has, there's by Green Lawn Cemetery, there's a memorial place, and Menduni is the guy that owns it. He wanted to buy some marble for his memorials, but he had to buy a boatload, and he didn't really want a boatload, so he contacted Alfred and see if he'd go halves with him on the boatload it's Carrara marble from the same quarry that Michelangelo sculpted. So he sculpted some things in marble as well. And then the Menduni fellow that had the memorial, his daughter, Nina Menduni, I wouldn't say she was a student of Alfred's, but he gave her some guidance and encouragement, and she became a sculptor in her own right. And then she moved, I'm not sure where she lives now, but she has a foot in Columbus and a foot in Italy, where her ancestors come from. and she spends a lot of time in Italy. But for a while, she had some sculpture in the Short North galleries. I'm not sure now.
What was his inspiration?
Well, his inspiration, he had an itch to sculpt from the time he was 6 years old, and he didn't mention it in the video, but the sculpture that inspired him was one of those generals on a horse, and in Hungary, and whenever he went by, it was really a well done sculpture. But after what he went through, he decided he didn't want to do any military kind of sculptures. He wanted all his sculptures to be about humans embracing each other, and in different ways, mothers and children, lovers, friends. And so his sculptures all show that human connection. And his synagogue was Orthodox, and one of the 10 Commandments is not to make graven images, and they take that seriously. So if you notice, there are no real faces on his sculptures to honor that, and yet he's able to evoke through the body language all this emotion, even without the facial expressions. So his inspiration when he began to actually sculpt was to sculpt things that evoke the human spirit, the celebration of life.
Did he study at CCAD? Did he teach at CCAD?
Well, he approached CCAD, and he wanted access to their technology there before Schottenstein funded him. And so he never actually formally studied there, and he kind of created a little chaos. You know, the hierarchy, he wasn't a teacher there, but the students all kind of clamored around him and they wanted tips from him. And so he would hold forth, and he would be like auditing classes, but during or after the class, he would sort of take over the class, and the students would be talking to him. And didn't go over too well with the sculpture teachers and things, but I think a lot of students got inspiration from him, including Nina Menduni.
Shared that with us modestly.
Yeah. Well, he was a force of nature, and so he kind of, you know, they say you either light up a room when you come in or when you leave. Well, he kind of took over a room when he came in.
He really managed a lot of breaks all the way through his life.
Yeah. Well, he was very focused, and he was very prolific. Starting from 60 something or whatever he was, 76, he probably produced thousands of works of art, and most of them are in private collections, and maybe a dozen are scattered throughout the world in different museums. But most of them are here in Columbus.
What brought his artwork to your jewelry store?
So he had the guy that was his lawyer and his insurance agent, his realtor, and his all-around go-to guy. And he called me up and said, I have a proposition for you. I need 5 minutes. I said, well, I can give you 5 minutes on the phone. He says, no, I have to show you. I said, well, can you tell me what it is? He says, no. And I'm like, I wasn't real keen on it because I didn't know what, we get cold called by jewelers all the time, and we're very careful how we select our jewelry for quality, and we have long-term relationships with most of our vendors, and then all year long we get called by people wanting to sell us things, and we're really not in the market for new vendors unless we're looking for a specific hole in our repertoire. So I was kind of a little skeptical, but he convinced me. So he and Alfred came in with a notebook, and I didn't know who they were. And I took the notebook and I opened it up, started looking through it, and I said, let's do it. And they said, do what? And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, we wanted to put our sculpture in your store. I said, yeah, let's do that. And they were kind of stunned because they they were expecting they have to do a hard sell or something like that. But I had envisioned this type of sculpture. It has a little bit, some of it has a little bit of Henry Moore flavor to it. And I was wanting that kind of sculpture in my store, but I've been looking for about 5 years, and I could just find, like, there's not to say anything against Mac Worthington, but I'd find like metal welded stuff and not this kind of emotive stuff. Kind of the stuff that they wanted to put in front of the James. So I don't know that I have a picture of the one that's in front of the James, but the board wanted to put a pumping heart that lit up when it pumped and had like neon light shows and things. And Arthur James nixed that, and he had something they called Hope that Alfred sculpted, where there's somebody holding up a bird's flying off of her hands.
That's the one there. Ohio Dominican?
Well, similar to that, yeah. I think he wasn't against kind of plagiarizing his own work, but it's a variation on that on a bigger scale. And so he made that as a gesture of the human spirit. And he said James said people come to the hospital for hope, not for technology. And so that's why he chose Alfred. And
Where is that one about? The larger one?
oh, it's in front of the James Hospital, yeah, at OSU. And then the Ohio Dominican one is very similar, except the woman has the Ohio Dominican uniform. Yeah, and it's a younger woman, but the same basic sculpture. And then for the James sculpture, he also was commissioned to make a bunch of smaller ones, and he probably sold about 40 of those to different donors, or not to the donors, but to the hospital to give to the donors. And right up at the front when he put the one in when it was built. But then over time, even when I was working with him, he would still cast more of them for additional donors. So maybe that answered that question.
Can you go up to the works that you have?
All right, yeah, sure.
Tell us about what they mean to you.
So this one is called Second Step, and he has one called First Step that's by the barn in Upper Arlington. They renovated a barn and they use it as for community gatherings there, and this is outside the barn. Not this one, but First Step is the child lets go of its mother's hands for the first time and walks away. And then a few steps later, it turns around, it comes back. So this is called Second Step. And it evokes, see, there's nothing on the faces, but you can feel the bond between mother and child through the body language. And so there's a large version of First Step, which is basically the same, except the child's turned around outside the Murillo barn there in Upper Arlington. And then Alfred started out, and as a youth, he was an athlete. He was an acrobat. And he was going to be in the same Olympics as Jesse Owens. But then when he was signing up, he was still using the name Goldstein. And when they found out he was Jewish, they picked an alternate. And so he had a gig, apparently it was big in the Middle East at the time, to have acrobatic dancers. And he landed a well-paying gig traveling around the Middle East as an acrobatic dancer, and he was scheduled to leave on the ship, but they had put they put embargoes in place, so you weren't allowed to leave Hungary. So he found out when he went to get on a ship that because of his name, he couldn't leave Hungary, and so he never got to be the acrobatic dancer. But this is his. This is Alfred here.
They were all remembering we could do that.
I couldn't do it, son.
And this is called First Flight, and I don't know if it's still felt, but for a while there, after when we did this with our kids, but then I feel people thought you'd pull the kids' arms out of their sockets, and so this was don't do this and don't have teeter-totters on the playground and things. But as far as I know, when my customers see this, whatever the rules are, they still like to do this with their kids. So, and we had a woman who had 3 pilots. Her daughters became pilots, and she bought one of these for her daughter in Arizona, and we shipped it out to her. She wanted to get one for each of the other ones, but I'm not sure what happened there. Either Alfred wasn't able to produce them, or her other 2 daughters thought they were they were good, didn't need one. But she really thought it'd be neat to give each of her daughters the first flight.
These are in your jewelry store.
Yeah, these are in my jewelry store. Now, we can run through these pretty quick, and I want to just stop on 1 or 2 of them for you.
What is there for you about selling jewelry? How do you love that?
Mostly the artistry behind it and the craftsmanship, and more we do custom jewelry. Bridal customers now either have family diamonds coming out their ears. De Beers, a diamond is forever kind of came back and bit them, because all the diamonds they sold in the last half of the 20th century are all in estates flooding the market now. So they're competing with themselves. And so, in addition to that, lab-grown diamonds are driving the price of natural diamonds down. And then even though they control the supply, they can't control the estate diamonds. So kids either come in with plenty of stones, and we custom make a ring for them, and it costs less than buying one off the rack because they have all the stones, or they buy a lab-grown, some horrendous like 5-carat lab-grown oval or something, or a marquee, and then we custom make a ring to go. So I have 6 people, I guess 7, including myself, that work with people by appointment to design custom rings. So that's the joy. And a lot of people, I would say most, probably 75%, 80% of our customers that do that are bridal customers. But we do 25% of repurposing people's jewelry and sometimes they're simpler projects. People will inherit this kind of gaudy dinner ring, a diamond cluster, and nobody in the family wants it. But then we'll say, that could make a wedding ring, an anniversary ring, and an engagement ring out of this one ring. And they're, oh yeah, maybe that's not so bad. I could give that to my granddaughter because she's getting engaged. So that's the joy of jewelry. You want to scroll these? So these are just to give you a visual of some of his other works that are in the store. But Suzanne wanted me to put that in the store. That was in her living room. She was Alfred's wife. This is the mother playing with the child. There's only 1 or 2 I really want to talk about. This is the one where they're running out of Hungary. This is Ava. Ava's the daughter and Suzanne's the mother, and they're beating it out of Hungary into Austria there. This is one of his rare animal sculptors, and he didn't always know what he was carving. I'm not sure I asked people, I've asked some geologists too, and they've given me surmises, but he just called this Blackstone seal. And this is his little. So Alfred was a naive artist. He was self-taught. His work doesn't look as naive as some naive artists, but every once in a while he'll throw in some kind of an odd little thing, like he just glued that eyeball on there because he thought that was kind of cool. But the base is that Carrara marble. That's probably a scrap that he had. Again, no faces, but it's obvious the emotion there.
Is most of his work like females or?
Men and women, or mothers and daughters, largely. This is, I want to stop here. This is Alfred And this is a guy, so when he was in the Hungarian army, they were allotted so many Jewish guys, and if one became non-functional, they couldn't get more men unless somebody passed away. And so this guy couldn't walk anymore on a trek through the snow in the wintertime. And he just sat down by a tree. And Alfred knew that the only way he was going to get shot and dumped in an unmarked grave so they could get a fresh guy that could do the job. So he carried him all day. And I talked to a Marine who saw this sculpture, and he was a big guy, like a halfback on a football team, and he was in the Gulf War, and he had to carry one of his friends like this for 8 hours to get him out of harm's way to the helicopters, and he could really relate to this. And he was saying he was probably, when I knew him, he was in his late 40s. He's still a vigorous, athletic guy, but he had permanent issues with his feet and his knees and his neck and his back from this one day when he saved his buddy's life. So anyway, that's one of Alfred's. That's a bronze casting. And again, he's on a scrap of Carrara marble from that boatload. We have people ask us, and then here he is, the acrobat. He this is one as well as he kind of, you see his bases, they kind of show what a naive artist was. He really didn't care about the bases. He just kind of cobbled them together. The art was what
It's work and balance.
yeah. So this balance, and I'll show you one later on this one you can just barely see in the background. That'll come up. She's balancing on one leg, so he worked it out so she was balanced. But he spent maybe several months. The one in front of the Lutheran Seminary there over by Capital University, that he didn't want that to like come down on a car or blow over on a pedestrian, so he studied that carefully and learned a lot about engineering techniques, and he studied airplanes and to figure out how to balance that so it was solid. And it's been there now for maybe 75 years, or maybe 50 years anyway, and it's held solid. So he was really interested in the balancing. This is also, he worked this out, so she's very solid. She's not wobbly or anything. She's just standing on one foot there. And this is what you do. The kid won't sleep, so you got to kind of walk them around until they doze off. And we have that here. He did this also as a, you'll see this in Worthington, downtown Worthington. It's in front of an insurance building, but there's like a park right at 161 in High Street that has green areas on the four sides. And this is on the northwest side. And before he died, he was going around cleaning up everything, putting everything to bed, tying up all the loose ends. And this is a beautiful green patina on it now, the one in Worthington, the full-size one in bronze. And he was trying to convince them to polish off the patina, and he scolded them for, if you use just a little Johnson's wax once a year on it, it'll stay forever. And they're like, we kind of like the green patina. He says, but in 300 years, it'll just be a pile of dust. And he wanted his sculpture to still be here. That I don't know what Worthington will be in 300 years. But also, this is one. He was. I put a sign up during the recession in 2008 that said that my grandfather had said, "Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without." And one of my employees said, "You're creating a hostile work environment." But Alfred thought this way. So this is bronze dust left over from his bronze castings, and it's combined with fiberglass. And there's something made like this outside the old governor's mansion, and it holds up very well outdoors, and it's light. And it looks like bronze because it's bronze powder, but it doesn't have a metallic sound. But anyway, this is one of his forays into. I'm not sure. I mean, it's an interesting. He was creative with his materials that he used. You asked about what kind of materials he used. So he used bronze, alabaster, marble, this fabricated bronze powder, and then also he used this black material, which I'm not quite sure what it is, but he couldn't really articulate that.
Have any idea how many pieces he made?
I think thousands, based on, like, when he first came to the store in 2011, he had hundreds still left, and he's just churning them out. And then he made these bronze ones. He had very carefully kept the molds, and he would spew them out, and he would wasn't sure how many he'd made of them. He numbered them. Like he would have a numbered edition of 10 or 12 or something. But then when people wanted them after, I just keep making them, but they wouldn't be numbered. But then he didn't keep good track of how many he'd made. But I would say thousands. In a short time. I mean, he didn't start when he was 19. He started when he was like 60-something. And this one, he said Michelangelo couldn't have sculpted this, because technologically, he wasn't just hacking at this with a hammer and a chisel. He was using that little Dremel machine you saw him using before, and he could kind of grind this out. And Michelangelo didn't have that technology. And so this negative space in here is, again, he hadn't seen that in artwork. I mean, you could see it in bronze castings, but when he did this, he hadn't seen it in sculpture, and like this is alabaster, I think. And this is called Great Expectations. I don't know if we get another view where you can see how pregnant she is, but we had an obstetrician that came in here to our store a number of times and measured her and then found out she would fit in the sconce as you came into his office. And he was about to buy, but it bothered him that she was leaning, putting all her weight on one foot, and he wanted to know if she could be straightened out and made symmetrical. And Alfred and I were like, you've delivered a lot of babies, but you got to shift your weight. You can't just stand there at attention. You're constantly shifting your weight, and so this is how Alfred's not going to change his work of art, so you could put it in your sconce. So we still have that at the store. This one's called Joy. Again, no facial expressions, but very clear what she's depicting. This is a couple embracing. This is his arm around her waist. So it kind of has that abstracted quality some of Henry Moore's work had. This is the one Suzanne wanted me to put in my store. Again, mother and child, no faces, but obvious how they feel about each other. Even the baby, you can feel that vibe from the little kid.
How long ago did he pass?
2017. I think we're back to the beginning again here. Thanks, Todd. So I think I've exceeded my time. If anybody wants, I can play. We have the two other videos from the YouTube channel. They're both 5 minutes long. And your favorite was the last one, right? So if you want, I let Alfred open. Alfred could close if you got another 5 minutes. Okay.
The second video. If it's 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's play the one you wanted. Was it the third?
You want to say here, Bob, we have to give a chance to say that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. All of that. Yeah.
As you know, Robert means in Teutonic shining or illustrious.
Out of the flames of human hate comes the ashes of death, and out of the flame of God's love comes the promise for love. It was a task for me to create that peace. Probably this is the only one piece in the world where a Lutheran seminary has a Holocaust memorial, which is commemorate all the hatred what was in the 20th century, black and white and Jews and Catholics and any religion, brushing away the hatred and doing the embrace to each other. And that's the reason I am having also the exhibit, because all of my pieces are dealing with humanity. I got a call from Mr. Kelly, and he was telling me, would you please go over to the St. Charles, because we are celebrating the 70 years of the founding fathers. I said, how come if we would commemorate the thought of the founding fathers, the reason why they want to have a memorial? So here is the founding fathers' reason why they were making a school to spread the knowledge. The Arthur James Cancer Institute, it's happened to be a new building, and Arthur James, he wanted to have a woman figure, and he heard about me, and that became my third piece in Columbus, Ohio, which is, the title is Hope. And on the pedestal, I was making a statement, never give up hope. The sun is always shining. And that's my reason, was to make the woman figure, let three birds to fly. The three bird is representing the human race, man, woman, and child. I didn't learn the sculpting from other sculptors. All of the project, what I am doing in my life, I started to studying for anatomy, and I started to studying the perspective, the basic of the artist knowledge. To me, to being a sculptor, it was just coming the conclusion of my life. I didn't have that aim. I just came up with the idea and certain things, and after the conclusion I became an illustrator, I became an artist, and that's why I became a sculptor. I feel satisfied because I believe something happened in my life, and whatever you believe, I believe it is the destination was for me to being a sculptor and to learn and to teach and give a guidance to the human race. There is no way we could work with hatred. And that's the key of my life. That's the key of my production. We should embrace each other. Everybody is important, and everybody is your brother. It makes no difference what religion you are, makes no difference what color you are. makes no difference where you were coming from. You are should embracing each other. No time and no way is place to hate. And I am working for that reason.
Turn to the person next to you and offer shalom. Shalom. Yes. The spirit of Alfred Tibor.